Member for Fowler.
Thank you, Speaker. Look, I also concur with the member for Curtin and member for Wentworth. I think it's with the government coming into the new government, promising to lead it differently, bringing integrity back into the House, and so therefore, from my perspective, to not accept Wentworth's, the member for Wentworth's amendment to be more transparent, to actually show what we're spending on. And I think the public would require that of any government in terms of big projects. And I think it's, I'm sure Tasmanian MPs and senators have been vocal about the spending of the new Hobart Stadium and are crying out for housing infrastructure projects. So I really call on the government to really lead the way in changing the way that we make policies in the House, and not to do the same thing that you accuse, or the government accused the opposition of doing, and really urge the government to consider the crossbench amendments in order to improve Infrastructure Australia, because infrastructure is really important for the country and for communities like Fowler, where we've had no investment in infrastructure at all, when we have such large population migrant settlement there. And with the 1.5 million people that we are going to bring to Australia, how are we going to plan for the infrastructure planning and, of our country? So I really urge the government to really think outside of the square and really be genuine in terms of how they want to address and fix the problem in Infrastructure Australia. Thank you, Speaker.
I give the call to the honourable member for Fowler.
Thank you, Speaker. I ask leave of the House to move amendments 1, 2 and 7 as circulated in my name.
Is leave granted? I call the minister.
Leave is granted.
Leave is granted. I give the call to the member for Fowler.
I move amendments 1, 2 and 7 as circulated in my name together. Overall, my amendments seek to ensure that the government think about the plan for infrastructure in communities where there are a large influx of migrants and refugees, such as electorates like Fowler, where they have had over 10,000 refugee settlement in our city in recent years, with no infrastructure planning in place to deal with the growth of the community. Amendment 1 and 2 refers to the auditing responsibilities of Infrastructure Australia to ensure that the decisions they make will have particular regard for migrant and refugee settlement policies. I don't understand why communities like ours, who have had to shoulder the challenges of settling refugees and migrants, miss out on resources that would enable these newly arrived migrants and refugees to one day be able to stand on their own 2 feet and contribute back to this society. This amendment may be specific, but migrant and refugee policy ultimately affects Australians currently living here. Now, we are about to bring in 1.5 million people, and therefore I would say that infrastructure is critical to sustaining the influx and the settlement of migrants. In Fowler has been a settlement city. We've had more than 70% of our population who've got parents born overseas and people who speak a language other than English. And we are a proud settlement electorate, and we're proud of that. As a former refugee myself, I know that people like myself have contributed to make so much to this rich cultural tapestry of Fowler. But our area is buckling from the pressure of having to accommodate more people with very little infrastructure support from successive governments. We are now facing a housing crisis and unemployment rate of 10%, 3 times the national average. And with the second airport being built out in Western Sydney, major infrastructure such as rail projects must be designed so that we can connect major cities from Sydney, Parramatta, Liverpool, Fairfield to the Batteries Creek Airport. Amendment 7 refers to the particular clause in which Infrastructure Australia allows for affirmative action in relation to the appointment of women in their Commission and Advisory Board. I really urge the government to also consider this point with relation to the appointment of people of culturally and linguistically diverse lived experience and have experience of infrastructure. In my previous life in the corporate sector, I've seen so many times where boards that do not reflect the rich diversity of our modern Australia. I hope that this will welcome the diversity of lived experiences in assessing infrastructure fairly, so that all communities will benefit ultimately. After all, it's the wealth of the diverse knowledge that will ultimately benefit everyone, from the highest levels of government to the communities across Western Sydney and in the regions. I ask the government to really consider my amendments above and to take action to ensure we do what's best for our diverse and migrant refugee communities. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The question is the amendments be disagreed to, and I give a call to the Minister.
Thank you very much. And again, the government won't be supporting the amendments, but I do appreciate, again, the member for Fowler, the spirit in which they've been raised, particularly in relation to Amendment 1, which really is reflective of the problems we've got around settlement policy and around our urban centres at the moment. The intention behind the amendment is absolutely understood and appreciated, having regard to population movement, particularly in relation to migration patterns, is a very important consideration when determining the adequacy, capacity and condition of nationally significant infrastructure. It is one of the existing wording of the bill clearly states that Infrastructure Australia must take into account population growth. So I think that we believe that adequately covers the intent of the amendment. In relation to 2, which is inserting cultural, again, the intention behind the amendment is understood and very much appreciated, but the existing wording of the bill, we think, covers the broad breadth of what you are trying to seek to achieve already in terms of the cultural diversity, and as well in terms of the Amendment 7, that we are committed to increasing cultural diversity. The way in which the phrasing around affirmative action is at the moment, that is consistent with government policy about what we are trying to do around boards. But of course there is a broader piece of work that we are doing around multicultural policy and multicultural strategy overall that's led by Minister Giles, that I think when you see some of that work, we'll see much greater improvements in the way in which we include people from culturally and linguistically diverse backgrounds in a range of projects.
I give the call to the honourable member for Fowler.
Thank you, Speaker. I ask leave to move Amendments 3, 4, 5, 6, 8 and 9 as circulated in my name.
Is leave granted? I give the call to the Minister.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Leave is granted.
Give a call to the honourable member for Fowler.
Thank you. I move Amendments 3, 4, 5, 6, 8 and 9 as circulated in my name together. I believe my amendments are small but measured to ensure that we bring accountability, transparency and integrity back into Infrastructure Australia. We've heard this morning from the member for Wentworth, Curtin, North Sydney about the need for transparency and accountability when it comes to government allocating funding to those areas and communities most in need in terms of infrastructure spending. And not just in marginal seats, or as the member for North Sydney said, not to pork barrelled into a seat that the government of the day would like to retain. Amendment 3 ensures that there is a reporting mechanism for the minister to announce a major funding commitment to a project that is not listed as a priority on the Infrastructure Australia website. As I previously stated, during the 2019 federal campaign, only one of the Coalition's 71 transport promises, valued at $100 million or more, had a business case approved by Infrastructure Australia. For Labor, it was 2 out of 61 projects, according to the Grattan Institute. The minister's written response must be publicly available and tabled in Parliament to ensure complete transparency. Similarly, under Amendment 4, the government must formally and publicly respond to Infrastructure Australia's key advice and findings within 12 months. Initially, it was recommended that this should be a 6-month period by an independent review into Infrastructure Australia. However, after discussions with the Minister's office, I understand that this may be a burden given the huge number of findings and recommendations they must receive. So I ask you to consider conducting these responses within a 12-month period. It's worth noting that this independent review into Infrastructure Australia was led by Nicole Lockwood and Mark Midrak. I think I pronounced his name correctly, who have had substantial experience in infrastructure, Western Australia, and the Department of Infrastructure. Amendment 8 will compel any commissioners or advisory council members to publicly disclose whether they were or are part of a major political party or affiliated with a political party, such as if they were part of the executive of certain lobby groups or trade union. While this does not stop people with vested interest from being on the Commission or Advisory Council, it gives the public the opportunity to know who is making certain infrastructure decisions. We owe our constituents that much. Amendment 9 seeks to legislate some aspect of the Advisory Council. Given they will be advising on massive infrastructure funding projects worth over $250 million, we want to ensure that there is integrity within these appointments and that they must have the relevant expertise for such funding decisions, particularly if it impacts so many communities across Australia who are in desperate need of new roads and public transport links. We all pay taxes and we all need roads and we all need public transport. We must focus on the priority areas and communities that are in dire need first. Thank you.
The question is the amendments be disagreed to, and I give the call to the Minister.
Thanks very much, and I'll just be very brief here. I'm noticing the time's ticking on a bit for everyone. Can I just say a number of the amendments you've raised go to similar points that others have made, so I won't recanvass those. Just in terms of the processes for disclosure of interests of members, there is already processes and legislation in place that govern the conduct and disclosure of accountable authorities, and that's the Public Governance Performance and Accountability Act. Additionally, of course, there is a process underway at the moment through the Finance Minister, where Linnell Briggs is looking at the appointment to boards, and conflict of interest issues are looking through there. So we'd allow that process to play out, and frankly, and also if any changes were to be made, they'd be made across the breadth of government entities, not just this particular one, which is why we're not supporting it today.
The question is the amendments be disagreed to. I'll put the question. All of those opinion say aye. Aye. Against no. No. I think the ayes have it. So 2 voices. Noes have it. Division required. Ring the bells for 4 minutes.